Just me and you. Tell me, Chicky, what you gonna do? Hey.
I got a letter recently involving talking book topics. It's a catalog of books available to talking book users, and until recently, it came in the mail 4 times a year as a paper catalog. The pages used to be a grayish newsprint color, and then in the last 4 or 5 years, it switched to what I think was a recycled paper, but more of a paper and less of a newsprint texture. The cover design has changed a lot over the years. They also changed sometimes how they laid things out in the catalog, but overall, it was a regular thing in my life for a lot of years. I was about 9 when adults in my life realized that I couldn't see. I have an optic nerve issue, so no amount of changing glasses prescriptions or anything like that helps me. I'm a little bit nearsighted, and I used to wear glasses for that, and then I decided they were too much trouble. But the main issues I have with seeing have to do with my brain not being able to sort out the visual information that comes in. I went to regular school, not blind school, and for a long time I tried to function like a fake sighted person. But over time, there were a lot of issues that began to come up. Back in the day of those big heavy glasses with the glass lenses, when it was realized that I had some issues with my vision, I wore glasses which were coated, the lenses were coated with something like paint, a brown polymer or something that they put on top of them so that they were permanent sunglasses. They were like prescription sunglasses, like way before they had the transitional lenses that they have now. I have pupils that don't contract because of my optic nerve issues, and so I'm super light sensitive. People used to comment on the fact that my house seemed like an aquarium or a cave because like a 40-watt bulb was much more comfortable for me than a 60-watt bulb or, God help me, a 100-watt bulb. Fluorescent lights, bright sunlight, stuff like that. The other thing I remember about those brown lens glasses is that I was much more self-conscious being a teenage girl, that I have what people call a lazy eye on the right side. I dutifully did exercises that helped strengthen the muscles that held the eye in place. So my eye, I say the eye, I mean my eye, so that it would look like it was looking forward and looking out, even though really a lot of times it isn't. And as I've gotten older, I just figure people just have to deal with it. Around the time having those glasses with the dark brown coating on the lenses, I got, through the same service that got me the glasses, I got what people used for talking books in those days, which was a super slow record player. You can see them on YouTube. Sometimes people put them on to demonstrate what they're like. There would be one record that used to be like a 78 ceramic record, and then later they had more like a flexible plastic record. They usually had issues of magazines on there, but sometimes it was a book if it was short enough to fit on there. And the record player turned incredibly slowly. If you look at YouTube, you can see videos of them turning at 8 revolutions a minute or 16. I didn't use that record player a lot because at the time I got it, which was in the early 70s, the talking book catalog was still really sparse, especially for something a younger person would want to read. It was almost entirely seniors who used talking books at that time. There are lots of smart, interesting, fun seniors, I know, now that I am one, who would like to read all kinds of interesting things, but at the time that they were making those services, they used the talking book machines for the newly blind. When I was a teenager, people didn't live as long as they live now, and now a lot of older people have things like macular degeneration. But when I was younger, people passed away before their eyes really started giving out. And so most of the people who were blind were new to being blind, and it was usually because of being diabetic. So when I was a teenager, the books that they had available were for kind of people who would watch Lawrence Welk. So there was the King James Bible, there was Reader's Digest, and then there were Barbara Cartland type romances and Max Brand or whoever was the cowboy, Zane Grey. I think there was a lot of Zane Grey. So, of course, I was 17, 18, and I didn't care about any of that, so I put away the super slow record player. Thought it was interesting technologically, but it wasn't a lot of use to me. For a lot of years, I just did my best to defeat eye strain and would just read with my one good eye, my left eye. Sometime, I was in my late 20s. I think I've talked about this on the blog before, so I won't go over it again, but I became aware of the fact that while I could still distinguish the letters, I could no longer read comfortably from the page. And because I went to college briefly when I was 18, then left, went to work, I came back 10 years later. In order to help me with my studies, I was able to get some low vision help. And one of the things I got was a talking book machine. And this was what was then the modern technology, which was a four-sided cassette tape that played very slowly. And it had 2 tracks on each side. So there was a large rechargeable battery player. This thing weighed about, oh gosh, it must have weighed about 6 or 7 pounds. It was almost like a little suitcase with a retractable handle. It had easy to find buttons on the top for people who were totally blind. And there was a series of switches on it and dials and sliders. So you could make the tone brighter or less bright. You could increase the speed. You could flip a switch if you wanted to play a traditional speed cassette tape on there. But what I used mine for almost entirely was talking book tapes. These would come in a plastic box which had flexible snaps that came over the side of it to hold it closed. And depending on how long the book was, you might get one of these plastic boxes, 2, 3, 4, if it was something really huge and long. And each tape was numbered with large numbers and then Braille. And it gave the first number on each tape of the 4-tape set. The first tape said 1, the next tape said 5. So the first one was sides 1, 2, 3, 4. The next one was 5, 6, 7, 8. So then the next tape was 9, and so on. They were stacked on little spindles inside this box. There were shallower boxes and deeper boxes, but usually there were like 2 tapes stacked on top of each other on these spindles facing one direction, and then 2 tapes stacked up on the spindles facing the other direction. Hopefully you got them from a person who had put them back in the box in the right order, but sometimes you had to reorder them, and also you had to check and make sure you had all the tape. Totally blind people would accidentally leave a tape out of the box, not realizing there was one sitting on the table next to the box they were loading, and they lost count. But most of the time, I got a tape box that was mostly in order, and you would take the top tape off and put it in the machine, and then you would set the switch to play side 1 of the first tape. Then you flipped the tape over eventually. They played a very long time. I can't remember how long a traditional cassette. They were 60 minutes usually, right? And then sometimes 90 minutes. So I guess one side played 30 minutes and one side played 45 minutes, depending on the length of the tape. Well, these tapes played much longer than that. Then you would get a little warning that you were at the end of the tape with a little tone. You'd hit the eject button, flip it over, listen to side 2. Then it would instruct you to change the switch on the machine because you were now going to side 3, which is the former side 1. So you'd flip it over again, and then having switched the switch over to play the second side, you'd play that side of the tape over again. And sometimes on these tapes, they erased them and re-recorded them, and sometimes you would hear a little bit of a noise. If you're old enough to remember what a party line sounded like on a telephone, that's what it sounded like a little bit. In the background, you'd hear a little but you got used to it. The best thing about not dealing with the tapes, besides the fact that they were just cumbersome, it was a lot, the machine was a lot to carry, and to listen to one book, you had to have this whole box of tapes and keep track of all of the tapes and stuff like that. But the hardest part was that if you lost your place, you had to listen to the tape go forward or backward, which if you've done on a traditional cassette tape, You don't do it for that long and it's not that big of a deal. But if you fell asleep or lost your place in a book and you wanted to find where you were at, they put tones onto the tape so that you could find the start of chapter 2, chapter 3. But you would have to, and it just went on and on and on. You'd have to turn the volume down, and then eventually you get like, meep, and then you think, okay, stop and listen. And they actually sold a auxiliary device that turned off the power to the player. You plugged them in the machine, or you could run it off the rechargeable battery. And then there was a switch. It was a little bit like one of those rolling switches on a lamp. You plug a lamp into the wall, and if you want easy access to turning the lamp on and off, you can get a roller switch on there, and it's taking over directing the current instead of going back and forth from the wall plug to the lamp. As long as the lamp is on, you can use the roller switch to sort of circumvent that. And that's how this thing worked. And it was a pressure switch. So if you fell asleep, your hand would relax. And if your hand would relax, you drop the switch and it would turn off the machine. So that way, if you went to sleep listening to whatever, Barbara Cartland, and the Duke hasn't revealed himself to be a Duke yet, you don't get a spoiler. But as you can tell, I really hated when I lost my place on the tape because I think I had the switch, but I didn't always use it. Or I would walk away from the machine, something would distract me, and I would forget to hit the stop button. They were very large buttons that had very raised symbols on the button. It wasn't the shape of the button at that time. They looked like they're very colorful for people who could see. They remind me of the little buttons that are on pop-up toys. Like my daughter had toys that would make a little Mickey Mouse or a little Donald Duck pop up if you push down a big colorful key. And that's what the keys on these old talking book machines looked like. And then they had a raised symbol on it to tell you if you were playing play, forward, backward, stop, and all that. And that all got digitized. And we started out with players that play a single cassette, sort of the size of an audio cassette, but it had a USB thing on it, and it could hold not only a whole book, but it could hold 3 or 4 books, which was such a huge change from having 24 cassettes for a long book, right? And at that time, you had to buy yourself a $15 set, which was a blank cassette thing to go into the machine, the USB connector cord, and then now that I think about that, oh, that was to hook it to your computer. That's what it was. You could plug this little cassette directly into the machine because you did get pre-made that were shipped to you the way the talking books came to me for free, like in those plastic boxes I described with the loops. They're very slow, and depending on where you were on the wish list, it might take a million years for you to get them, but you would request a book. The plastic box would come in your mailbox. Then when you were done with the tapes, you're supposed to line them up in the box and do all the good things. And there was a little address cardboard that was in a little recess in the box, and you would pull out the one that was in there. It was held down by little plastic clips, and you would flip the card over. It had a punched hole in the corner of it, so the totally blind people could tell which way around they were putting the card into the box, and also making sure that they were putting it the correct way so it wouldn't come back to them. So one side of the card had your address and your name, and the other side was back at the talking book service where they warehouse the tapes. So they used to punch a hole in the upper left corner of the card. So if you're totally blind, you could orient the card and make sure you had the right side up and with their address on it to send it back. Then you'd put that in your mailbox and they would take it away and then bring you new boxes. So now we were getting smaller boxes, individual boxes with just one of these cassettes in it, if you did it that way. But because you had the blank cassette now, you could go on a website and you could download books onto this cassette. And it was a big thing that you could do 4 on there. Well, now the newer machines are much more advanced. They have all kinds of bookmarks and place holding things. They don't make a noise when you go forward or back. They still beep, but you don't get the scribbly, annoying noise anymore. It goes backwards 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. I don't remember if it goes half an hour, it goes back an hour, or it goes back by chapters. And sometimes that can change. That still can be a little hard sometimes with the beep. Sometimes you don't know where the beep is taking you exactly, but it's much easier, much faster to find a place if you lost your place in the book. And now you can load all the books you want from the website, the updated, improved website, onto a thumb drive